Morning, everyone. Good to see you all. Alrighty, so day 8. For the next few days, we're gonna tiptoe into Nāda Yoga. Nāda means sound. Obviously, chanting, has to do a lot with sound. And there was a sect of yogis that worshipped and revered sound as the fundamental framework of existence. And what they essentially believed was, instead of focusing on, the more obvious dimensions of life, the more materialistic dimensions of life. They believe that health and understanding and wisdom was best cultivated by observing the most subtle experiences of life. And they thought that subtle experience was sound, but more specifically vibration. That everything is energetic, which I think all of us can agree upon, whether we take a more mystical or a more sort of like scientific objective stance. The question is, can we leverage the fact that life is vibratory to our benefit? And so the Nāda yogis said, yes, they can. And if you sort of unravel their scriptures and their narratives and you attempt to map them over what we know now as modern people, you start to find a thread of coherent logic or understanding, which is really, really enchanting. And so that's what we're going to attempt to do for the next 3 days is reframe this ancient knowledge and these narratives in a way that makes sense to the more rational modern mind. And so first thing is a story. We're trying to tiptoe into mysticism. We're attempting to perceive the world in a more mysterious and enchanting and simply said magical way because you're curious of that. For whatever reason, we're sort of highlighting the fact that we all seek meaning, and more importantly, we seek new meaning often in our lives when the world turns gray. And so the little part of this story I want to share suggests just that no one can open these doors but you, and you have to want to open them. You have to want to own. You have to want to internalize. You have to want to do this practice. And just the fact that you're here, and you take the time to sit down doesn't mean you want it enough. That whatever's going on in the inner experience of your mind, the inevitable thorns of doubt or impatience or boredom, I highlight them often because they are so prevalent in the psyche of all of us. That is the real challenge. Those are the hurdles that you must overcome to really develop a powerful relationship and touch these unique experiences. And so this little story, the Katha Upanishad, we're just going to highlight the very beginning. A boy is sacrificed to the god of death. And the point is, the boy sacrifices himself to the god of death. His father meets Yam, the god of death, and gifts Yam his cattle. But he gifts Yam the skinny and the unhealthy cattle. And the boy, sort of antagonizing his father, proclaims in front of the court, why are you giving this king the worst and the skinniest of cattle? Why don't you give him something that really matters to you, father? And the father's like, what are you doing, son? That's, you're supposed to be on my side. He goes, why don't you offer meat? And the father's, reluctantly, now that the proposal has been made, the father reluctantly gives or places his son in the herd, in the gift, in the sacrifice, and the story proceeds. And Nachiketas, the boy, encounters the god of death and proves himself to be a mystic, and we'll talk about this later on in the challenge. But the point being, Nachiketas offered himself, and you must offer yourself. No one can offer yourself to this process, especially this process. No one can make us do anything, really. But when it comes to sort of sitting and being still and really renouncing the thorns of the mind, again, boredom, mistrust, doubt, confusion, impatience, all of those sort of sticky elements, no one can step beyond them but you. So just think about that. You must step forward. And so what are we going to get into today? What are we stepping forward into today? Nāda, we're getting into sound, and I'm really excited about these lessons because it makes the mysticism of this practice very real for us. The general pattern of mysticism is it moves from the external to the internal. And so our stillness, our posture, our internalized focus, chanting the Om, it helps us. It helps us literally pay attention to what's going on inside of our body, which is called interoception, instead of paying attention to what's going on literally outside of us, whether it's our apartment, whether it's traffic, whether it's someone we're talking to, or the future. We consider that external because we are disassociated from the immediate now. Even though it's happening now, even though it's happening in our head, it distances us from the reality of our inner bodies. And so gross to subtle, external to internal is the direction, or is the way in which the path moves. But that direction isn't necessarily the path. We go from the gross to the subtle, from the external to the internal, to discover for ourselves the secret of our existence. And that's when it becomes deeply mystical. We practice this, as profound and unlikely as it seems, to discover the soul. And so the phrase that is stuck in my memory that yogis use to explain this is, you are a pith and a reed, and you are attempting to extract the reed from the pith. You are attempting to extract the seed from the husk. And just to know and believe in that seed is one momentous step. But then to take the time and to sacrifice what must be sacrificed, to remove it from its husk and actually develop a relationship to it, as mysterious and cryptic as it is, that is the great success story of the mystic mind. And then for me, it's like, to live in both, to hold the soul high up in the priority set of my mind, but also live a normal life and watch Netflix and go to restaurants and, spend money and live in the world, but then take the time every once in a while, every day, a few times a week, to sit and authentically for myself have a ritual that enables me to touch that timeless ancient space. It really sort of adds weight and adds meaning, new meaning, back to new meaning to my routines and hopefully to yours. And so we're doing this. We're moving from the gross to the subtle, the external to the internal. But how exactly do we do that? And so now we fall upon the Nāda yogis. We can use sound as a bridge, as a ladder to help us get there. And so before we dissect, there are 4 dimensions of sound that we'll get into tomorrow. We can just break sound into 2 camps, Anahata and Ahata. Anahata is the internal sound. Ahata is the external sound. It specifically refers to music because Nāda yogis use chanting and music to build a relationship to vibration. So Anahata, and if you're familiar with the chakras, Anahata chakra, right, the heart center, and then Ahata, right, the sound that we all hear and dance to and love. And so just sort of like very Indiana Jones-ish, mapping all of these mythologies and these stories together, the first utterance of the nadis, which we talked about, these energy channels, came from the Chandogya Upanishad. And it said something like, Shatam chaika cha hridayasya ikacha. And it meant there are 101 chaika cha channels, hridayasya, nadyas, heart channels in the chest. And so we're talking about the chest. Anahata is the internal sound. Anahata also refers to the heart center. So they're talking about something going on in the chest. So all the yogis, Hatha yogis who worked with the Chandogya Upanishad and Nāda yogis who just worked with sound are both saying, if you pay attention to your chest and a vibratory experience in your chest, you will extract the seed from the husk. So what is in your chest? You have your heart, yes, but you have your vagus nerve. And so the vagus nerve is the 10th cranial nerve. You have nerves that come out of the base of your skull. And the vagus nerve is the biggest and most influential nerve of the parasympathetic nervous system. The parasympathetic nervous system is Ida Pingala. It is the lunar cooling channel. It is that part of our body that generates physiological peace by adjusting our neurotransmitters and our hormones to put us in a state of healing and relaxation and regenesis. And so what they're saying is, if you chant the Om, but it can be anything, if you chant seriously and seriously work to feel the center of your chest, Hridayasya Nadyas, the vibrations or the channels inside the chest, or Anahata, or the heart center, and the inner sounds that are happening here, you will find peace. You will know Shakti. You will know the divine. And so they're mapping this physiological technique of skillfully relaxing, which I think we underestimate. We underestimate the stress we carry in our bodies, and we underestimate the potential of relaxing our bodies in a really skillful way. If you do that and start to believe in a higher purpose that exists internally, you will sort of open the mystic path, and the world you behold will no longer be the world you beheld. So, super, super interesting. And so before we get into our practice, again, the only way you can sort of play this game is if you make the sacrifice, if you choose to renounce that skepticism, if you choose to sort of put yourself in the flock of the believer and push your world away and enter the house of death, enter the house of yum, and play these games seriously. And the reason it's sort of the house of death is because you have to renounce your practicality and you have to renounce your rationality and your fixation with time and goals and preference. And if you can do that and play this game of relaxation and chanting, the legend says you will be rewarded with more than you think and more than you expect. And so what are we going to practically do? When we chant the Om now, we're going to chant it in three different ways. Vocally, fairly loud, so a lot of physical vibration, and then quietly, very soft, so less physical vibration. And then the best part, mentally, you will chant the Om in the mind, and to your surprise, you will still feel the physical vibration. And there's a neurological sort of reason for that. When you imagine your body doing things, your brain still sends signals to those body parts. So if you imagine that you're running or you're doing yoga poses or you're doing breath work, if you're familiar with the exercise, your brain still sends signals to those body parts, to those muscles, but the signal is repressed by another part of your brain, in the motor cortex. And so you feel it, but the motor cortex is repressed, so it's not like you're actually doing it. And so you will feel the psychic sound. You will feel Anahata, and it will all cinch that these mythological, symbolic sort of narratives were just metaphorical ways of expressing literal experiences. And if you leverage those literal experiences within your practice, you can touch mythical truths that themselves are discovered to also be quite literal. And that's really enchanting. Groovy. So let's get into this, everyone. Awesome work today. Strong seated position, wrists resting on knees. Step one, good posture. Feel your fingertips. That buzzing in your fingertips, that vibration, Anahata, the internal sound. And all yogis are saying, especially the Nāda yogis, is if you follow this internal vibration, this inner sound, it will lead you somewhere good. And so just like in the Katha Upanishad, Nachiketas, the boy that sacrificed himself and placed himself in the flock or in the herd of cattle, he makes many sacrifices in that story. To sign up to this challenge was a sacrifice. To sit down right now is a sacrifice. To lengthen your spine is a sacrifice. To focus on your fingertips buzzing involves sacrifice. The ethos is, I will continue to sacrifice until there is nothing left of me, at least while I'm in my practice. And so if you can't feel the buzzing, it takes time, but trust that it's there, you're feeling it, you just don't think that's what I'm talking about. Your expectations are too high or too profound. And if you can feel it, there it is. It's pleasurable. Bring a random finger to each thumb, artistry of the pose, hand mudras. Breathe into the belly. Breathe into the chest. Avoid the upper chest. Really slow down your breath today. So whatever you think a slow breath is, and you have a personal definition of that, double it. And when peace comes, and when the confidence of peace comes, just bring your hands to heart center, take a few breaths, actively remembering this peace and who you had to be and what you had to do to facilitate it. And once you've had enough of that remembering, bring your wrists back to your knees for Bhumi Sparsha Mudra. Left hand to the lap, right hand to the knee. And so if peace comes today, it comes today. If it comes quickly, it comes quickly. But if it doesn't come, it doesn't come. That's fine. And once you assume Bhumi Sparsha Mudra, the left hand, prajna, the empty bowl, the right hand, upaya, reaching for the earth. Remember, your practice is art. It expresses a transcendental message. The internal is as important as the external. The subtle is as significant as the gross. The intangible is as real as the tangible. And the soul is as true as the body, as society, as the world. To believe that, and then to prioritize that internal space above the practical space, defines a mystic mind. Shunyata drishti, look into the darkness of your closed eyes. Notice how that perks you up. That activates the sympathetic nervous system. So you remain awake to this ever internalizing practice. Awesome. So the first level of sound, ahata, vocal sound. Take the time, chant your Om. Feel the vibration in the chest. Hridayasya nadyas, the energy channels. Just about 5 minutes here. And now chant the Om as quietly as you feasibly can. From the gross to the subtle, from the external to the internal, this quiet Om is in between Ahata, vocal sound, and Anahata, internal sound. It's the next rung in the ladder. And again, like Nachiketas, we must sacrifice dimensions of ourselves to play this game effectively. Those dimensions are boredom, impatience, expectation. Don't worry about your body, just focus on the chest. Hridayasya nadyas. Feel what's happening there. And so now the next rung in the ladder. Chant the Om in the mind. And still, Hridayasya nadyas. And still the vibrations in the chest. Because imagining physical actions still creates a conversation between the brain and that specific part of the body. But this is Anahata. This is the inner sound. And what you are doing is toning the vagus nerve, strengthening this little biological wire, the 10th cranial nerve that comes out of your skull, wraps around your face and throat and stomach and chest. And the stronger this little wire is, the more peace you have. Now stop repeating the mantra in the mind, but continue feeling the vibration in the chest. It is self-generating. Every breath in, redirect your attention into the chest. Every breath out, redirect your attention into the chest. And so that is the Om. Not the idea of Om, not the symbol. That is the Paranad. That is the primordial sound. And the Nāda yogis worshipped it. They sat in caves and spent time at its feet. And they were rewarded with peace and health and wisdom. And that's because as the vagus nerve is strengthened and the parasympathetic nervous system is strengthened, our bodies are healed, our minds relaxed. And so in this last minute, you've isolated the sensation, hopefully. Let's just empathize with Nachiketas and the moral of this little part of the story. I must sacrifice myself to this process. I must choose to leave everything else behind and give myself to the game. So again, whatever impatience, distraction, doubt, skepticism, warranted or unwarranted, remove those thorns from your mind. And just for 3 breaths, everything is directed into the chest. Now from here, listen. The internalizing effort is symbolized by your left hand, the empty bowl, prajna. But when you listen and pay attention to the world around you, it's symbolized by the right hand, upaya. And as you listen and acknowledge your day and your environments and your walls and your floor and your possessions and your body, what isn't vibrating? What doesn't buzz with this aliveness? And so that's it. It's a different perspective. It's a different way of seeing the world, almost as if you could see into it instead of just at it. Bring your hands to heart center, tall spine. Take a second with your own insights. Take a second with your own discoveries, positive or negative. All good. There's wisdom in both. Thumb knuckles to third eye center. Gently press your thumbs into the skin of your forehead. And that same buzzing, vibratory experience. It's in your chest, it's in your forehead, it's in your thumbs, it's in your skin, it's in your brain, it's in the sky. Om. With an exhale, release your wrists to your knees. Position 1, random finger to each thumb. Keep your rhythm slow. And with a breath in, open your eyes. Back to the external, back to the gross, back to the material, where things are differentiated. Space and walls, different colors, different people, different moments.